Revan shivered in the cold. Beside him, Malak said something, but the fierce wind whipping across the plateau devoured his words.
What?
Revan shouted.
Are you sure it's here?
Malak called back.
It's here.
Revan said with a nod.
I can feel it. Maybe it's on the other side.
Revan glanced over at the other peak rising up beside them, barely visible through the swirling snow. It was nearly identical to the one they were on. A tall, narrow column of wind, carved ice and snow rising up several kilometers from Rekyud's surface, its peak worn to a smooth, flat plain of ice.
It's this one,
Revan answered confidently.
The entrance is around here somewhere.
The two figures moved slowly back and forth across the exposed plateau, searching with the Force as much as with their eyes.
Here,
Malak shouted.
I have found it.
Revan woke from the dream with a start, his mind groggy as he tried to get his bearings. It was cool in the thermal tent he and Kandra shared. The insulate lining kept out the worst of the weather, but the nighttime temperatures were still low enough that Revan felt a chill through 2 layers of clothes and his sleeping bag. As his eyes adjusted to the soft glow of the small heater in the center of the tent, he was able to make out more details of his surroundings. Canderous was still asleep beside him, wrapped tight in his sleeping bag and snoring loudly. Revan's mind began to reassemble the bits and pieces from the previous night. He would hoped Canderous would offer more details of the marriage to Vila after she would have stormed out of the supply shack, but he would stay silent on the subject. Despite his curiosity, Revan hadn't pressed him. Instead, they would spend the rest of the night celebrating the big man's return to his people. Edric and the others offered up countless tales of Canderous' youth, his many battles and victories against overwhelming odds with the stuff of legend among clan order. They would also offer up plenty of Kreia, a bitter Mandalorian ale. Not wanting to be resented as an outsider, Revan had matched the other revelers drink for drink. The vile beverage packed plenty of kick. He hadn't a hangover this bad since his wedding night. His head was spinning, his eyes were blurred, and his mouth tasted like he had been chewing on Bertha fur. He would still be sleeping it off if not for the dream.
No, not a dream. Another memory bubbling to the surface.
He and Malak had been searching for something here on Rekyud, something that was somehow connected to Mandalore's mask. He didn't know what it was, but with a little help he might be able to use the details of his dream to figure out where they had been looking. He peeled back the sleeping bag and immediately felt goosebumps prickling up on the flesh beneath his long-sleeved shirt. Ignoring the cold, he picked his way through the semi-darkness until he found his personal holocron lying under a pile of clothes in one corner of the tent. Scooting back into the warmth of his sleeping bag, Revan activated the device.
T3, can you read me?
A tiny holographic image of the droid materialized in front of him, beeping with concern.
Everything is fine.
Revan reassured in a whisper.
Just try to keep it down. Canderous is still asleep.
The astromech's response was an excited whistle, though the volume was slightly lower than before.
See, I knew you'd be able to put the hawk back together without my help.
T3 beeped indignantly.
Yes, that snow gets everywhere, but it will melt. Besides, you can worry about it later. I need you to do something for me. Start scanning the topography maps for 2 massive columns of ice, standing close together, 2 or 3 kilometers high at least. When you find them, send me the coordinates.
There were roughly 30 seconds of silence on the other end before T3 chirped a reply.
Great work, T3. Remember, keep an eye on the ship. I will call you if we need anything else.
Revan turned off the holocron, knowing the easy part was over. T3 might have been slightly annoyed with him, but dealing with the droid was going to be a whole lot easier than getting the snoring giant beside him up and moving.
Wake up,
he said, reaching across the heater to shake Canderous out of his slumber.
We need to talk.
Canderous grumbled something profane in Mando at him and rolled over onto his other side, Revan said, shaking him even harder.
You have to get Vila to move the camp.
Huh, or what? What about Vila?
Canderous mumbled, opening one eye.
You have to get her to move the camp.
The eye closed again.
That's her call, not mine. She's the clan chief.
I think they're looking for Mandalore's mask in the wrong place.
Both eyes snapped open, and Canderous levered himself up to a sitting position.
Well, why didn't you say so?
Everybody is here, Vila declared.
Say what you have to say.
Revan's head was still pounding from the Kreia, and in the close quarters of the supply shed her voice was loud enough to make him wince. Including Candace and Revan, a total of 8 had gathered for the impromptu council. Vila had called them together at Candace's insistence. 3 men, 2 women. Edric was there, and Revan recognized most of the others from the night before, though he couldn't recall their names.
We have to move the camp.
Candace told them, as when they first arrived, Revan and Candace had decided to let Candace do most of the talking. It would be easier to convince the Mandalorians if they heard the idea from one of their own, provided Vila was willing to listen to anything her husband had to say.
Move the camp,
she asked incredulously.
You think it's so easy to just pick up and go?
It took our scouts weeks to find this location, one of the other women chimed in.
This is a good spot.
Edric agreed.
We're sheltered from the worst of the wind and snow. The mountain protects us from getting flanked, and the only way in is right past our sentries.
Give me one good reason we should move,
Vila demanded.
Because we'll never find Mandalore's mask if we stay here.
Candace answered. There was a long moment of silence, his words hanging in the air.
Nobody knows where Revan hid the mask,
Vila said quietly.
The clans have each staked out their territory, hoping it's in their destiny to find that which we all see.
Seems like a poor way to choose a leader.
Vila glared at him, but it was one of the other women who replied, Fate will make the choice for us. Whichever clan is destined to find the mask will.
Is that how all the clans ended up here on Narrated?
Revan countered.
Fate, chance, blind luck.
You show your ignorance when you speak of things you don't understand. Fate and destiny are not the same as luck. It was not chance that brought us here. It was persistence, perseverance. We are here because we are strong.
She paused a moment, then continued a little more calmly.
When Revan hid Mandalore's mask, most of our people scattered in disgrace. But some of us refused to give up. We stayed behind to look for what was lost instead of running off to become mercenaries and hired thugs.
As she spoke, her eyes flicked toward Candace. Revan followed her gaze to see his friend staring at the floor in shame.
For years we've kept up our search,
she continued.
We know Revan disappeared for 3 days after the massacre at Malak and Revan. There are only a handful of stable hyperspace lanes in that sector. Only a few dozen habitable planets he would have been able to journey to in that time. So we've been searching each world in turn, scouring the surface meter by meter. It took us 2 years to explore the entire planet, but with each world our numbers grew. More clans joined in the search, and each clan's numbers increased. Our quest gave us purpose. It united us as a people once more.
She looked back at Candace.
Slowly those who turned their backs on the Mandalorian ways have come trickling back. Now we number in the thousands. Over 100 clans have gathered on Kreia. If we fail to find the mask here, we will move on to the next world. And our numbers will continue to grow. Eventually we will find what we seek. And when one of our own finally reclaims Mandalore's mask, our numbers will be legion. On that day, the new Mandalore will call upon the armies of our people. And we will answer.
She turned and glared at Revan once more.
That is what we mean when we speak of fate,
she concluded.
We will find what we seek. It is inevitable. It is the destiny of our people.
The end of her speech was marked by a solemn silence. Looking around the room, Revan could see the power her words had on the other Mandalorians. Even Candace had been moved.
I can help you achieve your destiny,
Revan promised.
I know where Revan hid the mask. Listen to me, and I will help you find it.
Impossible,
Vila said with a shake of her head.
Nobody knows where he hid Mandalore's mask.
I have access to resources you don't.
Revan insisted, choosing his words carefully.
Republic records, military transcripts, battle plans, flight paths, and navigation charts. You say you aren't even sure if the mask is on Narrated. But I am. The mask is here on this world, and with my help, Clan Order will be the ones who find it.
Vila didn't say anything at first. Instead, she turned and fixed her gaze on Candace.
Abner is your friend,
she said, her words almost an accusation.
Can we trust him?
I wouldn't have told him of our search if I didn't trust him with my life.
Candace answered without hesitation.
And I wouldn't have brought him if I didn't believe he could help us.
All eyes focused on Vela as she considered all she had heard.
Where do you suggest we move our camp to?
She finally asked.
About 50 kilometers from here, 2 columns of ice rise straight up, towering several kilometers above Rek'Gid's surface.
The twin spears.
Edric blurted out excitedly.
Are you saying the mass is there?
There is an entrance to a tunnel on the plateau on top of one of the pillars. The tunnel leads deep into the heart of the ice. I believe that is where Revan hid Mandalore's mask.
The twin spears are in Clan Gendra's territory.
Vela warned.
If they catch us moving in on their turf, there will be blood.
Did you really expect to find the mask without having to fight for it?
Candace asked. Vela shook her head. Then she turned her attention to the rest of her advisors, scanning their faces, reading their emotions.
Pack up the camp.
She shouted at last, thrusting her fist into the air.
We're marching on the twin spears.